My father had that look on his face again, the one he always wore right before asking me to give something up and call it love. The ballroom glowed gold beneath the chandeliers. Waiters moved between tables with silver trays. A string quartet played something soft and expensive near the dance floor. 280 guests laughed like nothing cruel could happen in a room this beautiful. My sister Rowan stood near the floral arch in satin and pearls, smiling for photographs as if the whole night had been designed to hold her exactly where she believed she belonged. And maybe it had, because by the time I noticed my father watching me instead of the bride, I already felt that old pressure in my chest, the one that said I was here to keep the peace so no one else had to feel uncomfortable. My name is Tessa Bellamy. I'm 31 years old, and in my family, I had been the daughter who understood things for so long that people stopped asking whether I wanted to. I stood near the back of the room with a glass of champagne warming in one hand and my penthouse keys tucked inside my clutch. I had come straight from home and barely thought about bringing them. Then Grant, Rowan's new husband, drifted over with a polished little smile. Still living alone in all that space, he said. Seems almost selfish at this point. I gave him the kind of smile women use when we need one more second to think. Then Rowan turned from her photographer, looked straight at my bag, and said, "You did bring them, didn't you?" And when I saw my father start walking toward me with that calm, practiced smile, I knew he was not joking about my penthouse anymore. As always on Revenge Pulse, this is an original work of fiction, written by the channel's author for storytelling. I had been trained for that smile long before I ever wore heels to a wedding. Not the happy kind, the useful kind. The one you learn when a room turns tense and everyone looks at you as if peace is your job. Rowan had always been better at needing things. I had always been better at absorbing the cost. That was the family pattern, polished over years until it almost passed for love. When we were kids, Rowan could break something, cry first, and leave me holding the blame. My father would turn to me with that tired voice he used when he wanted obedience to sound like maturity. "Let it go, Tessa. Don't make this bigger." He said it when she ruined my clothes. He said it when she took money from my drawer in college and called it temporary. He said it so often that silence began to sound like goodness. It followed us into adulthood. When Aunt Lenora got sick, Rowan visited in bright little burst flowers, perfume, 10 careful minutes. I was the one who drove her to the hospital, stayed through the scans, fixed the medication chart by her sink, and slept in an armchair when the nights got bad. I handled forms, groceries, calls, repairs. I never listed any of it. There had been warnings. Rowan once stood in my kitchen, looked out over the windows, and said, "This place could solve a lot for the family." My father said it softer another time. "One good decision can help everyone." Across the ballroom, Aunt Celia caught my eye. "Lenora knew you carried more than they ever admitted," she said. Then my father stepped close, smoothed his jacket, and said under his breath, "Don't make this difficult tonight. If I say something in front of the guests, just do the right thing for your family." The room went quiet in stages. First, the quartet softened because my father had lifted his glass. Then the conversations thinned, table by table, until 280 people were facing the head table with that warm, obedient attention expensive weddings always seem to create. Harold Bellamy smiled like a man about to bless the room. Rowan leaned into Grant's arm with practiced softness, her veil catching the light. I stayed near the back, already cold inside. My father began the way men like him always begin when they want control to sound generous. He praised Rowan's beauty, Grant's future, the meaning of family, the holiness of sacrifice. A few guests even nodded. Then he looked straight at me. "There's one last gift tonight," he said. "A gift that shows what family really means." I did not move at first. He had to know I understood. That was the worst part. He knew, and he was going to make me walk into it anyway. When I stepped forward, I could see Rowan clearly. She was not shocked. She was not embarrassed. She looked moved in a way that had been practiced somewhere private before this night ever began. Grant's expression was tighter, but not confused. He knew enough. My father held out his hand. "Give your sister the keys to the penthouse." A nervous laugh flickered somewhere in the room, then died. He kept speaking in that calm, tender voice. Rowan was beginning a new life. I was still young. I could rebuild. A home was only walls and windows. Family was what mattered. "You can do this one thing," he said. "For your sister. For all of us." Every eye in the ballroom pressed against my skin. "No," I said. His jaw tightened. "Don't be childish." "No, Dad, not this." His hand hit my face so fast, I barely saw it move. The crack split the ballroom open. My clutch slipped. My keys struck the marble and skidded across the floor. No one spoke. My father stared at me and said, louder now, "You are selfish, and you are humiliating this family." My cheek burned. My ears rang. I bent, picked up my keys, and walked out without looking at any of them. Under the hotel awning, with the night air cutting across my face, I took out my phone and called the one man I had prayed I would never need to involve. The cold hit me harder once the doors closed behind me. Not because the night was cruel, because it was clean. Inside, everything had been chandeliers, silk, and applause cut short by a slap. Out here, the air told the truth. My face still burned where my father's hand had landed. My fingers were locked so tightly around my keys that their edges bit into my palm. I called Julian Mercer before I could talk myself out of it. He answered on the second ring. Calm, precise, always the same. "It happened," I said. "Come now, bring everything." No startled pause, no wasted sympathy. "I'm on my way." I lowered the phone and stared at the revolving doors. The worst part was not the sting in my cheek. It was the moment before it, the second my father looked at me and chose Rowan in front of all those people as if I were not his daughter. Only an obstacle standing in the wrong place. Through the glass, I could feel the story shifting without me. My father would already be repairing it. Tessa is emotional. Tessa is jealous. Tessa always does this. He had spent years teaching people how to misread me. Then my mother stepped outside. For one foolish second, I thought she had come to touch my face and tell me he was wrong. Instead, she whispered, "Please don't make this bigger than it already is. If you just hand over the keys tonight, maybe this can still settle." That landed deeper than the slap. Headlights swept across the curb. A dark car stopped. Julian stepped out, lifted a leather binder from the back seat, and shut the door with quiet finality. The moment I saw that binder in his hand, I knew this was no longer about one slap. By the time I walked back into the ballroom with Julian beside me, my father had already started repairing the story. His voice carried just enough sorrow to make strangers generous. He stood near the head table with one hand lifted, asking everyone for patience, explaining that emotions were high, that family moments could get messy, that everything would be handled privately after the reception. He made it sound almost noble, as if he were protecting the room from me. Rowan helped him. Of course she did. She had tears in her eyes now, bright and careful. One hand resting against her chest, as if she were the one fighting for air. Grant kept an arm around her waist and used that polished, measured tone men wear when they want to calm a room without giving up control. "This is just family stress," he said. "I'm sure everyone understands weddings can bring out strong feelings." And some of them did start leaning back toward him. Not because they were cruel, because people prefer a clean lie when dessert is already on the tables. My mother caught my wrist before I reached the center aisle. "Please," she whispered, "just give them the keys tonight. We'll settle it later." Later. That word had covered a lifetime of surrender. "No," I said, and kept walking. My father saw Julian then and moved fast enough to stop us before we reached the head table. "Who is this Julian?" Never raised his voice. "Julian Mercer, trustee and executor in matters related to the estate of Lenora Bellamy." At the sound of Lenora's name, Aunt Celia straightened in her chair. Harold tried to smile. "This is a wedding, not a place for legal paperwork." Julian opened the binder. "You made it one," he said, "the moment you attempted to force a property transfer in front of witnesses." Julian set the binder on the head table as if he were placing something sharp under bright light. "The penthouse," he said, "is not a casual family asset. It sits inside a protective trust structure established by Lenora Bellamy years before her death." You could feel the room lean in. He opened to a tabbed section. "That trust contains a coercion clause. If any family member attempts to pressure, threaten, publicly shame, or physically force Tessa Bellamy into surrendering the property, related reserve distributions tied to that family branch are immediately suspended pending trustee review." My father's face changed first. Not outrage, not embarrassment, recognition. A hard, stunned fear moved through him, as if some locked hallway in his mind had just filled with light. "That's not possible," he said. "The reserve was separate." Julian looked at him. It was never separate from conduct. A murmur ran through the ballroom. Grant stepped forward too quickly. Rowan and I never asked for anything improper. Julian turned one page. "You may want to reconsider that." He laid out printed emails, valuation questions, and earlier messages discussing how the penthouse would stabilize the couple's first years. This had not begun tonight. Tonight was simply the ugliest version of a longer plan. Beside me, Aunt Celia spoke at last. "Lenora told me Harold would try this eventually. She said he looked at Tessa's home the way other people look at money they think is already theirs." That cracked the room wider. Then Julian removed a single handwritten page from the back pocket of the binder. "This is Lenora Bellamy's memorandum." He read only enough. "She had left the penthouse to me because I was the one who stayed. The one who drove her, waited with her, fixed what needed fixing, and sat through the long nights." The apartment was gratitude, not inventory, not something to be traded across a wedding table. I heard the air leave the room. In an instant, the meaning changed. I was no longer the difficult sister refusing to share. I was the daughter my father had struck in public to seize the one thing a dying woman had chosen for me on purpose. Rowan's crying turned real then, but my father said nothing. He only stared at Julian like a man realizing he had not just lost a penthouse that night. He had lost the safety net he thought family would let him steal from forever. The room did not explode. It turned. That was worse. A few minutes earlier, people had still been looking for excuses. Family stress, wedding nerves, a younger sister making things difficult at the wrong time. Now those same faces held something colder. Recognition. The kind that arrives late and then refuses to leave. Guests who had looked at me with irritation went quiet. A woman near the back slowly lowered her phone, not because she had lost interest, but because she finally understood what she was filming. Two older relatives on my father's side began whispering with open disgust. One of them said, "Not quietly enough. He hit his own daughter to take her home for the bride." That sentence moved through the ballroom faster than music ever had. Grant's family looked shaken in a different way. not moral first, practical first. They had just realized they had been folded into a plan involving property that was never truly available. Grant tried to steady the damage with a lawyer's face and a weak line about not knowing the full structure. But men who know nothing do not flinch at the exact wrong moment. He knew enough to expect a benefit. That much was clear. My mother stepped toward me, her hand half lifted, as if touching my arm might undo the room. I stepped back before she could. It was the first time I had ever done that. Across the ballroom, Rowan was no longer the fragile bride. She was the woman who had stood still while our father hit me for her future. No tears could clean that image now. Then Grant pulled her into a corner, jaw tight, and said low enough to sound private, but sharp enough to carry. "How much of this did your father hide from us?" And that was when I knew the wedding was no longer falling apart. The marriage was starting to. After the noise thinned, the hurt got cleaner. No one was shouting now. That would have been easier. The ballroom had settled into that dangerous kind of quiet where every word lands harder because nothing else is there to hide it. My mother stood a few feet from me, hands clasped too tightly, eyes moving between my face and the floor as if truth might be easier to say to marble. "I knew they talked about it," she said at last. "Not like this. Not tonight. But I knew. For 1 second, I felt nothing. Then it came all at once. Not surprise. Not even anger first. Just a cold rearranging inside me. My mother had not failed to see. She had seen and chosen silence. That was the part that stayed. Aunt Celia did not let the room soften it. Lenora changed that trust after she heard Harold say, "Tessa will give in eventually." Her voice was dry and exact. She knew what kind of patience this family liked to feed on. My father flinched, then tried one last time to drag everything back into the language that had protected him for years. He said he was thinking of the family. He said Rowan needed stability. He said I had always been the stronger one, and that sometimes strength meant giving more because I could survive it. There it was. The whole system in one sentence. He had never called it favoritism. He had called it practicality. He had never called it using me. He had called it trust. He had never called it selfishness. He had called it love. I looked at him and did not raise my voice. That was never love. I said, that was convenience. For the first time in my life, my father had nothing ready to throw back. He just stood there in the middle of the ballroom like a man who had finally let a whole room see what he had always been. Once the truth landed, everything after that became procedure. Julian did not drag it out. He spoke in the calm, final tone people use when the decision has already moved past emotion. The attempted transfer was void. Any future effort to pressure, negotiate, or disguise ownership would be blocked immediately. The trust's penalty provisions were now active. There were witnesses to public coercion, witnesses to physical violence. The record, he said, was no longer fragile. My father looked smaller hearing it said that way. Not innocent, not wounded, just smaller. Men like him build themselves out of assumption, strip the assumption away, and half the structure goes with it. Across the room, Grant had stepped away from Rowan without seeming to notice. His family was no longer smoothing anything over. They had the look people get when they realize they have not married into a respectable family, but into a private collapse dressed in formal clothes. My mother asked if we could speak alone. Not now. I said, maybe not for a long time. She nodded once like someone accepting a sentence she had helped write. Aunt Celia came to stand beside me without speeches, just her cane, and that sharp old gaze pointed toward the rest of them, as if daring anyone to try again. I did not announce victory. I did not list what had been done to me. I only picked up my keys, turned, and walked out through the same doors I had crossed in shame less than an hour earlier. That night, standing alone in the silence of my penthouse, I understood that I had kept my home. What died in that ballroom was the belief that loving my family hard enough would ever make them fair. A few months later, the penthouse felt different. Not warmer, not softer, just honest. Before that night, I had lived there like someone half apologizing for being allowed to stay. I kept the keys buried in my bag, out of sight, as if even possession could look arrogant if the wrong family member noticed it. I moved through my own home with a quiet caution, as if I were still waiting for someone to tell me I had mistaken gratitude for ownership. That part was gone. I stopped explaining the apartment when people asked about it. I stopped shrinking the story to make other people comfortable. And when a friend of a friend called because her brothers were pressuring her to sign over land their mother had left her, I told her to come by. Then another woman came. Then another. Nothing grand. Just tea. Papers spread across my dining table. Names of lawyers. Forms to keep. And the things you should never sign in a room full of guilt. I did not do it because I thought I could save everyone. I did it because I knew what it felt like to be treated as the easiest person to sacrifice. My mother sent letters, a voicemail too. She said she was sorry for staying quiet so long. I believed she meant it. That did not make the silence smaller. My father faded in the way some people deserve to fade. No courtroom, no screaming ending. Just less and less of my life belonging to his shadow. One evening, after everyone had gone, I stood by the front door and hung my key on the brass hook beside it. For the first time, I did not hide it. Some people spend years confusing a door left unlocked with love. They call your silence kindness, your sacrifice loyalty, your surrender proof that you care. But a home is not meant to become a payment for staying wanted. And the moment you stop handing people the key to your peace, they finally have to face what they were really asking for all along. Some people call their convenience love until the day you stop paying for it. If this story stayed with you, tell me in the comments which moment broke your heart most and at what point did this stop feeling like family to you. I didn't lose my family that night. I lost the illusion that love was supposed to cost me my home.